Hi all. Sometimes Gambit systems are played not with clear, very clear, visible things like, the king getting mated or viciously attacked, but sometimes it's more structural positional considerations. And in this game, where Michael Adams is the clear leader in the field in the current British Championship at 2706, he's much higher rated than fellow British Grandmasters. He plays a very subtle gambit at one stage of the game. So Summerscale is known for playing very solid chess, very solid pawn structure, and he often plays the caro-kann, which is rock solid. We have here Adams playing e5, the advanced variation, which if white's not careful, black will get a nice souped up French defence with the bishop outside of the pawn chain and with the ability to play c5. And we've mentioned this system before. There was the Russian Championship, I think, a video last year where we saw knight d2 to b3 as one of white's plans in this system to try and discourage black from playing c5. But in this game, Adams wasn't worried about black playing c5 at all. So after bishop e2, you might say, surely, this is like an improved French defence. Bishop's outside the pawn chain. This is illogical almost. But it's interesting here that the white's control of the d4 square tactically. Nxf5 talked at length about swapping central occupation of the centre with pawns with pieces, and here we see that kind of principle as well. Bishop e3, favouring to swap that d pawn for a piece. So what do we have in exchange? We have a lot of pressure. That knight is exerting pressure in all directions, in fact. So Summerscale protects f5. He doesn't want his pawns doubled. Now knight d2, and it looks as though the coast is clear. This isn't anything too bad, except that this bishop here is going to be difficult to develop. So Summerscale plays knight bc6 just to try and challenge that knight on d4. And it's reinforced, seemingly giving a concession to black that, what about this pawn? It's dislocated away from its pawn chain. Without the pawn on d4, surely this pawn is weaker. That's after all why you have a pawn chain, to be able to, protect your advanced pawn. You have a pawn on d4. So there's a certain logic to Summerscale's next move. Aron plays bishop e4. So with the idea, two ideas, that knight takes d4. If immediately knight d2, there's bishop knight d4, bishop g2. There's bishop f3 in some lines. There's knight g6 in some lines. Combination of knight g6 and bishop f3 is just to try and pick up this e5 pawn. The downside of this move, though, is that it facilitates Adams playing a vicious gambit, and as I say, not in the unsubtle sense of a vicious king attack, but to get structural damage. So this beautiful, solid structure at the moment is totally disrupted now, with Adams' idea coming up. So after castles, knight g6, which is logical for the reasons stated before, and it's also unravelling, the king side to be able to castle. It's hitting e5, but the problem is now shown up. First there's bishop b5, asking black what to do about c6, tying up that knight, so this knight's a bit more menacing as well, potentially. Queen d7 was played to protect c6, and now Adams plays this gambit, which is, as I say, for positional considerations, for structural damage in particular. He exploits the dark side of this bishop e4 by playing this move, which I don't know if you would consider yourself, but he plays knight g5. So he's offering e5. That's the gambit. Offer e5, but what do you get in exchange for it? Well, Summerscale took e5. So what do we get for this gambit? First, there's the move f4 played. So you might think, well, maybe it's f5. That's the idea. Well, f4, f5 is useful for giving scope to the rook on f1, giving it possibilities later, like access to f4 or f5. So knight g6, and now we see the first bit of damage. Knight takes e4, so doubling black's pawns on the e file. Another bit of damage coming up. f5, taking this pawn away from the central control of d5, also unleashing the rook a bit more on the f file. And now more damage. Bishop takes c6, so that there's structural points to that bishop b5. So we have isolated pawns now, and white now offers down the material, offers the exchange of queens with knight takes f5. It's difficult for black to still untangle here though after this queen exchange. How does he get his king to castle here, without losing g7? He plays knight e5, and this allows Adams to get his pawn back, but with great interest now. His investment in that gambit, creating all this structural damage, but also, he doesn't even have to be a pawn down anymore, so it stops being a gambit. After his next move, he plays rook f4. And black's still having difficulty developing. So from that amazingly solid position, one slightly dodgy controversial move, bishop e4, is drastically punished with this gambit, changing the picture from black's position being solid to being kind of tactically vulnerable now after rook takes e4. g6, just knight d6 was played, picking up the dark square bishop, weakening the dark squares even more. In particular, f6 is being probed now, as well as c6, as well as the immediate threat of rook takes c6 because of that pin on e5. So in this position, actually, it's difficult to see what black can do. Maybe you might consider king f7. In fact, I'm considering king f7. What's wrong with king f7, you might ask? Let's do an engine check here. Actually, is this too much pressure for the rooks and that bishop? Is it bishop d4? I expect. Is it this move? Bishop d4 is good. Also, there was a flicker of bishop g5 being good to undermine e5 and f6, but bishop d4 is also good. Bishop g5 or bishop d4. So bishop d4, say, is a plainer move to consider, and just taking, and then just taking on c6, and white would end up with a clear advantage. So in this position, actually Aron just castled, and now we have the move bishop h6, and this is unpleasant because if rook d8, there's rook takes f6, so the rook goes to f7. But now Adams plays the quiet waiting move h3, just depriving the knight of g4 and putting black into an uncomfortable kind of not zugzwang, but just a position where there's very little to do, a depressing position. Rook e8, there's no real threat of knight f3 check to try and win the rook because g takes just conveniently protects e4. And actually this self pin means now actually Adams can win a pawn. He's been pawn up now. Rook takes c6. So can the bishop be trapped though? Summerscale seems to want to try his luck here with g5. There's not much else to do anyway. Okay, bishop g5 isn't working yet because the e5 knight is protected. So b3, depriving the knight also of c4. Look how much counterplay has been snuffed out of black position. That's the only sort of decent piece, and Adams has sort of surrounded it on both sides, stopping it coming to either c4 or g4. Now we have rook fe7, which unfortunately has, this pawn is now there for taking, and again, this tactic's just ineffective. Just takes. It's just hopeless. It's just so 2 pawns down now. It's getting more and more desperate at the black position. Offers an exchange of rooks, which is taken, and this bishop's still hitting g5. It's not trapped now. It's actually threatening to win a third pawn. And after rook c6, there's also, if Adams wants it, rook c8, but he's also defending c2. Here, Aron's had enough. He just resigns. So it seems a solid position was just blown to bits, and let's see that in action replay. So it's almost as if giving black what he wants in the exchange French without the bad in inverted commas bishop. It's actually on f5, but here Adams is content to swap the centre pawns for pieces and pressure, and with that pressure to unleash a gambit which the consequences are not so clear. They're to do with structure, and that enables winning material with interest later. So he plays rook f4 and he wins his material now with interest, and also he manages now to win a pawn himself very soon, after this rook e8 was played, because what is black going to do? He can't get his rook off without allowing rook d8. So I don't know. This is a questionable move, but the position is kind of dire, and he's getting material down now, which is too much now. And that was it. Please leave any comments or questions on YouTube. Thanks so much.